only Eddie in the yard, Eddie on the ice, Eddie in his office, Eddie with the dog, Eddie on vacation, Eddie with the wife, Eddie. Don't call me Eduardo unless you know me. Eddie, Eddie Oos Life. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, man? How we doing?
Good, man. That game last night, brother. I don't know about you, but I think the one thing that stood out to me was on that power play where Hebman went to take the shot, and then Cirelli was going out there to block it. I was like, no, 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 no.
It was that slow motion play at the end of the movie
And he
where it's
blocked one,
oh no.
and it hit his stick and went out to play. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, man. That's and if you're the Golden Knights, you're looking at Shea Theodore going down with injury, and you're going, why are we doing this again? Because if you're them, now you're watching the game tonight going, please Jack Eichel be okay. Please Jack Eichel
Right.
be okay.
Absolutely.
That's the risk you run, right, Ed, when you're doing a tournament like this.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, to be honest, I wasn't excited about the Four Nations going in too much because of just that. You're putting a lot of players at top players at risk, right? But I did, from watching from afar, the atmosphere, and especially Team Canada playing in Montreal, you could sense the energy in the building and everything. And you've been to the Bell Center. It's a wild place to watch a hockey game, but no matter what it is, and then you magnify it by that. And I thought it was a really good night, really good event, really good game to start off with. And but yeah, I mean, every team now, especially after seeing the Theodore injury, is kind of holding on to hope that their players make it out okay physically. But and again, the stuff that we talked about yesterday, last week, is these players want to represent their country so much that they're probably playing through a lot of things, mid-season, no matter what, just to get there. And we don't know really what Sidney Crosby's playing through right now, but it really there's a different adrenaline level when the game starts in these things. But yeah, I think every GM, every coach is clutching their chair handles right now to be like, okay, let's just get through this.
Yeah, I was looking at Crosby, and that was only a second shift in overtime last night, because that was a long overtime.
Yeah.
What do you think about the two things that I know a lot of people were talking about on social media last night from this tournament that could possibly be taken over to the NHL regular season? And that's being a 10-minute 3-on-3 before the shootout, and 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points if you win it in overtime in the shootout. Do you think, how realistic do you think that is from coming to fruition?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the TNT guys said it on the broadcast, is that with the 10-minute overtime, the concern is mainly, I would say, from the Players Association being like, there's so many games that go to overtime now. How much does that build up on guys over the course of a long schedule? Even those 5 minutes, those extra 5 minutes over the course of a game, does it make for better hockey? Absolutely. And like I said, we years ago, people kind of liked the shootout. Now it's become this thing that's like,
right.
This is why. How are you settling critical points with that? But I'd like to see it. But again, I think that's the thing I think that's something that's going to come up in the next CBA. I know Bettman talked about how we really shouldn't worry about that CBA being if there are any hindrances to the CBA. I think that'll come up in the discussions, but I think that'll be the players to kind of decide. Hey, do we want this? Because it is going to be a little bit more of a grind, because there are a lot more games going to overtime nowadays. And teams are more willing, and Lightning are probably one of them right now, is you want to get points any way you can. So you're going to try to, push a game to overtime maybe and take your shot in 3-on-3, especially a team like the Lightning, who has a lot of really good skill position players when they go on 3-on-3. So obviously, over the past couple of years, you'd wish they'd be a little bit better in that 3-on-3.
Right.
But and what was the other thing was the point structure. Yeah. I mean that's interesting, because I do think that, again, now going back to that, is that teams are value, points matter so much in this league, especially we look at kind of the crunch that teams are in right now, and I think it would add a lot more interest to some of the games, and probably a lot more strategy in terms of how do you get these extra points when they're being handed out. So I think that actually adds a little bit to it. I'd love to see that, to be honest. The 3-on-3, I just worry about there's already such a physical toll that these guys play in an 82 game schedule, and they battle through it to get to the playoffs and to be at their best in the playoffs. I'm not saying that would take away from the level of play come the postseason. I think anything that could possibly do that, you've got to wonder about, because these guys already, like we said last week, these guys already go through so much stuff to get there, to get to game 82, and to get through, 4 grueling rounds of postseason hockey to get there. We've seen it. We've seen it when they,
right.
Yeah, how much it matters when they get eliminated in the first round. We've seen how much it matters when they make it all the way. So, I'd hate to think that would affect guys' careers in the long term. And I think that's really what it comes down to, because a shorter career means, less ability to, make money. And, you kind of got to worry about that big picture when you're thinking about it from the player's perspective.
Yeah, and I wonder too if the NHL takes the route of the NFL, where it goes, yeah, we don't really care, because the NFL doesn't care about the health, because at the end of the day, it's all about the almighty dollar. So if if hockey wants to continue generating these big revenues and the salary cap going up, like, obviously something has to, there's got to be some kind of trade-off, right? So I get that aspect of it, but as we see in the NFL, these decisions that they're making, I mean, you're seeing TV deals, you're seeing the ratings go up, you're seeing halftime shows talked about around the world, right? I wonder if the NHL kind of leans the other way, right? Or leans the same way as the NFL does and goes, yeah, I know it could be more hockey, but maybe they make it 4-on-4, right? So it's less ice to cover. Nathan McKinnon hated it last night. And I'm like, yeah, okay, bro, of course you'd hate it, because you skate from one end of the ice to the other, and then you shoot the puck every time. Like, of course you're going to be tired.
Right.
Like, I don't want to hear from you, obviously, bud. Like, we know you're going to be tired as hell. But it was cool to see the Lightning guys out there last night. I mean, Point with the assist there on the Marchand goal. I thought Cirelli and Hagel, the penalty killing, and then I thought Victor Hedman was one of the best players on the ice last night. And seeing John Cooper behind the bench wearing red was a little weird. I didn't necessarily like John Cooper saying all these nice things about Montreal and the Bell Center. I was like, bro, calm down, bro.
Well, that's John. I mean, we know.
I know.
We know him. We as people who see him every day, we know that Coop does tend to put it on a little bit more frosting to the cake in when he's under under a bigger
spotlight,
a bigger market and a bigger spotlight. So that's not too surprising. But
I like that. More frosting on the cake. That's a good one. You should be a writer.
But that wasn't good at all. That wasn't. I was.
I like that. I thought it was very good.
But yeah, I mean, but like, just talking to Coop last week about, I wrote a story about it for the paper on Wednesday, and we talked about this last week. Is I do think he's a guy who it does mean something to play
right
there and to play in that environment. And, he's not going to get that in Torino. He's not going to get that. I mean, in Milan, he's not going to get that, hometown playing in front of your home crowd. So to the guys from Canada, that's going to be something that, the guys who are on this roster in next year in the Olympics, they're not going to get that feeling. So I think that, you do kind of soak it in, just like, Team USA in a couple days when the tournament moves to Boston, that's going to be something, I think they'll cherish, that you don't get that opportunity that much anymore. Maybe you will. Yeah. Obviously, with the World Cup of Hockey, the news from yesterday,
What do you make of that, Ed? What do you make of that? Every 2 years, World Cup, Olympics.
I like it. I think that, I think that, again, it's this balance between, the NHL schedule and trying to grow the game and having a feel of what international hockey, best on best international hockey means. And that's what it means to, the teams, to the players, to the fans. Is every 2 years a cycle kind of like that? Is that too much? Is that, I think, everyone, the proof will be in the pudding when to answer that. But when it comes to it, I kind of like it, like Victor Hedman's played in 10, international competitions, so, and he's going to run to it every chance he gets, right. Just because he has that pride and he wants to wear that jersey. He wants to represent the Three Crowns. And so there's guys like that. Now there's other guys who, want to do it because it's best on best, but, aren't necessarily as into it. So I think that's the thing, is how does it get stale over a certain time frame, like that. Cooper always talks about that, being assistant on that North American team in the last World Cup of Hockey that had guys like, McDavid, McKinnon,
Matthews, yeah.
Marner, just a like total stud class when they were younger. And, I know there's not going to be a North American team for the 2028, but, over the course of time when these guys are playing in so much of it, I do think there's a generational gap there. Like the Sidney Crosbys, they want to play, in this thing no matter what. The Victor Hedmans, but are the younger players into it as much as maybe we would like to think they are. So I think that proof will be in the pudding of what it means. Or do they like the traditional hanging out with their buddies on the All-Star game weekend and just kind of shooting the shit. So I think the proof will be in the pudding with that. But
yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it'll be good. It's all up to the players, right?
Right.
I know what the world's like as far as like what the temperature is on the grand stage and how it's more important than sports what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, but it's tough to have these competitions and not have Russia involved when you can argue that you have Nikita Kucherov and you have Andrei Vasilevsky and Shesterkin and Sorokin and all these other and Panarin. You have all these big players that are watching the four nations. And I remember being there, and I said it before on today's show. It was really awkward there last year in Toronto during media day, and Leon Draisaitl from Germany and David Pastrnak of Czechia. They were just like, yeah, we don't care. Like, it was just like, F you, F this. Why do we care? Why would we announce this? Why am I being asked about it? It's got to feel kind of crappy, right? It's one thing if you're from a smaller country. For years, Andrzej Kopitar was from Slovenia. So, I mean, he was really the main hope of them being good, right? So if they weren't involved, I think you kind of get it. But when you're Russia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, right, you're like, man, we got some NHL players, some good NHL players. I think that's something that they need to serve those masters too, because Ed, it's great. The Four Nations is great, but it's weird that McDavid's there, but Draisaitl's not. Marchand's there, but Pasternak's not.
Right.
Pointer's there, but Kucherov's not. Like, there is something missing in this tournament, though.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, and since this is the first time, maybe, hopefully, I haven't seen too much of the details of the World Cup, but, it'll grow to be some of that. But, yeah, like there is such an international flavor to the game and so much representation across the board. Even a team that's probably not wouldn't win a competition like that, but has so much representation as a team like Switzerland. You have JJ Mo on the Lightning, but there's the Devils have 3 or 4 guys on that team that are
including Roman Josi.
And as much as it's about the powerhouses, and no doubt, like, politics aside, is a competition better with Russia in it? Yes. And do those players care about that more than playing in an all-star game? Yes. We know that, no doubt. Nikita Kucherov and Andrei Vasilevsky, Mikhail Sergachev would all run to an event like that, to be able to represent their country versus, as we know, sometimes doing a skills competition.
Really?
As we've seen. So, but as much as it's about those powerhouse teams, I think it's also about, the teams like Germany and Switzerland and Slovakia, all these teams that, like, are really pushing, like, as much as we want to make it about 4 countries or 5, whatever it is, the game of hockey has become so good, and these teams play differently. Some of them have more speed games, some of them, grind it out, and I think something like that can really kind of showcase, the powerhouses, but also these up and coming teams. Latvia, some of these teams that are on an international stage are really, factors when you play in world championships and stuff like that. So ideally, I think that's where you want it, and again, the politics aside, having Russia in a tournament that's best on best, we all want that for hockey. I think, I think, not seeing Andrei Vasilevsky, not seeing Nikita Kucherov, not seeing a lot of like you said, the Panarins, the Shesterkins, all these guys who are, amazing players, not participating. We all want to see that, but
I would want to see what Russia would do with the goalies.
Yeah,
I mean, Matthew's going to start, but like, what do you do with Shesterkin? Is hang him out there, right? And then Sorokin, who's good, or Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky's like, I have a cup too. Pretty wild.
Right.
We at this point last week, the Lightning had won 1 of 4 games. They were about to play their second one that night against the Ottawa Senators before the Saturday-Sunday affairs in Detroit and Montreal. This team went from 3-9 in the division, Ed, to now it's like, all right, I mean, that was a huge week for them. Not just that they won, Ed, but that they won in regulation.
Yeah, no, they as important as it was, like we said last week, to get points, it was equally as important to not let the opponent get points, especially with these division games. So they like point wise, finally, it was the best case scenario for them. And we saw a lot of one, especially in those back to backs, and those back to backs are hard because they're road back to backs and they're afternoon back to backs, and we've seen this
Yeah.
team struggle in both of those scenarios. And they were as ready from the jump as we've seen them in a situation like that. And they took those leads. There were obviously some. Those were games that kind of were back and forth. They weren't those. There's the way they say they want to win games. 2-1, 3-2. But I think the big things were, one, you got those leads. You held on to momentum. Even when the other team pushed, and the third period, the lockdown. You even if you allow a goal, don't allow a tying goal, but also too, I think sometimes when we look at this team, they played better than they've deserved, than they've gotten in terms of points.
Right.
But it's also been the timing of goals that they've allowed, and that those 2-1 goal, you're holding on to a 2-1 lead, who scores next, or 1-0 lead, and a lot of times you've seen the other team score, a tying goal. In both of those games on the back to back, they were in those similar situations, and they scored that next goal. And it was in the second period, maybe early in the third period. And I think that those were important, and those are things where, you build momentum, you build confidence. I think we kind of saw this a little bit last year, kind of the same time. I think it was probably a little bit earlier in the season, and maybe, mid January than early February. But, that's when a team kind of has to kind of find itself. And, we talked to these guys before they went on that back-to-back. And, a lot of the talk was about, it's great that they got a couple points at home, but that's what they're supposed to do. Now it's about, getting these division games on the road. And we know they haven't played specifically well on the road in general, let alone, on back-to-backs or against division opponents. So, I think it's the best way that they could have ended going into the break. And, it gives them something coming back when, a lot of these guys are going to come back to practice who aren't in the Four Nations on Wednesday. So, gives them something to kind of build on. And, you got to start all the way over again, though, too, because it doesn't, the momentum is hard to carry on after 2 weeks off. So, it's going to be another test when they get back to it.
What did you make of Dylan Duke? And do you think he could possibly make an impact for this team down the stretch?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he's one of those guys who he has a game that fits this team right now in terms of what they need. And that's a guy who can skate. He can get in some of those grimy areas, battle for pucks, and find his way towards the net. During training camp, a lot of people, said there was a little bit of Tyler Johnson in him. One of those guys who, you saw the goal, it started out with him battling for a puck, winning a puck battle against the boards, off the far boards. And, he's just kind of is the guy in the right spot at the right time on a rebound and puts it in. So we've seen that from him. We saw it in training camp. We saw it in the preseason. Obviously, he's in his first full pro season. So you want him to get in there and build his game in the AHL. But it's funny that he's the guy on the team, and Connor Geekie isn't, the guy who made the team out of camp. But, a lot of those guys went down to Syracuse to get some more games under their belt, which is always good. But, I just think Duke right now has a game that really fits in that, middle to bottom six role. And the big thing that bottom six need is scoring. And if he's a guy that can show he can do it, I think, we've seen Gage Concalves do it, and even though he's been playing up and down the lines since he came back from Syracuse. And sometimes that's just what you need. You need a guy to go back down there, be told, hey, this is what we need you to work on. And when you come back, this is what we need you to bring. And, I think Concalves has brought that since he came back. And I think, in the brief stretch that we've seen Dylan Duke, he's been able to bring what they need. And that's really what they need right now is, you need that depth scoring and, and not just scoring, but just creating those opportunities. And, we saw Gergensen's finally get that goal in Montreal, which, I'm surprised he can do the old Corey Perry and bring the monkey after that one. But, he's another guy who's, more of a veteran guy, but obviously he's created a lot of chances for himself, but, either just couldn't find the back of the net or just kind of struggled around the front of the net. And so everything's kind of trending upward in terms of finding those kind of guys, and this is also what Julian needs to see, because he's got to, like we talked last week, this is such an important time where you're really kind of gauging what are the guys who can help you internally, and how does that affect what you need externally. So I expect those evaluations that are being made right now to really kind of hinge on what we've seen the past few weeks, and in terms of what they're really going to go shopping for before March 7th.
Yeah, it's going to be funny because Julian's going to have to be so in depth of everything, and then boom, here we go. We got to turn the page, man. We got the trade deadline's right around the corner. You got to get back to trying to make this team better. Before I let you go, let us know about the stories you got up on TampaBay.com/sports in the Tampa Bay Times, my friend.
Yeah, I had a little bit of light week, but we the story on Brandon Hagel is still up there, and just kind of his path here. I think we talked about a little bit, last week in terms of, him being a guy who, who knows if he joins a team like the Lightning from the beginning, maybe he doesn't have that opportunity, but
right.
Everything kind of worked out for him, even though he was a guy who really had the battle to find his opportunity. He gets a chance in Chicago, and then, gets that opportunity to show that he can be a goal scorer and be, one of those guys. And then he comes to the Lightning and is surrounded by this room that's won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and how that helped his growth. Obviously, playing with Anthony Cirelli has helped him and helped Cirelli kind of find their ways of their all-around games. And then, John Cooper, like I said, just what it's meant to him, in terms of, he was saying that, he remembers where he was when he was asked to be the coach for the 2022 Olympics. And he was at his, on Anna Maria Island, on his house, and how happy he was to hear that. And then sitting behind his desk in Amalie Arena when he was told that the NHL wasn't going to go to the Beijing Games, and kind of thinking, are you going to get that chance again? Are you going to have, are you going to be relevant and down the road? And obviously he has been, and I think he's seen as almost kind of the guy of Team Canada now in terms of coaching, and but also how he's still going to this kind of event, trying to that it's different, like coaches in this game. And I think Coop is actually one of these guys who loves to talk to other coaches and try to help them and feel them out and everything like that. But for a lot of them, it is a kind of a cloak and dagger thing. Is you keep a lot of stuff to yourself, you keep it under the vest. But how much he was looking forward to going to this thing and learning from some of his coaches, from Pierre DeBoer, from Cassidy, Rick Tocchet, who he's got a big history with. I mean, one great thing is he talks about the '87 Canada Cup and how much, like he remembers that as the best hockey he's ever seen played. Now all of a sudden, he's best buddies with Wayne Gretzky because they're neighbors together in Coeur d'Alene. Right. And Rick Tocchet, who was also on that team, is a good friend and one of his assistant coaches on Team Canada. So it's funny how John Cooper, the guy who really never played hockey at a high level, was a lawyer for several years, and now here he is, like, living this dream out that he thought might have slipped away from him a couple of years ago. So you got that going for him too. So just a couple stories that spent a little bit of time on and worked on their TampaBay.com now. And again, we'll follow the Four Nations, especially next week, as we kind of get to the nitty gritty of what teams are going to get to the championship and stuff like that. So that's what we got.
Make sure you subscribe to my friends over at the Tampa Bay Times. Obviously with all the Ed stuff, Mark Topkin now down at Port Charlotte for spring training. A lot of great stuff there. So again, TampaBay.com/sports. Subscribe to the Tampa Bay Times, man. We want to support local. That is so freaking important. And we're mentioning that the other day. We're going through all the local, whether it's papers or online podcasts, like everything. We got to support our people here in the Tampa Bay area. Ed, I appreciate your time, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you next week. It's been the longest we spent apart from each other in months, my friend. Tell your better half I said hello, Shannon. Make sure she keeps you in line, all right? No misbehaving you.
I've been home a lot, so
she's like, can hockey come back already? Get this guy the hell out of here.
Get him out of here.
Yeah, appreciate you, brother. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, buddy. Talk to you later.
You got it, pal.